Hey, that was my job to do. I had one job this morning and I failed. Good morning.
Good job, Matt.
I did a little, and then it.
And here we are.
I don't know if you heard before I started the video, but I was like trying hard not to sneeze. Kind of threw me off. Anyway,
Got it.
please.
Yeah. No, you couldn't have. That's out of your hands at that point. Truly. Well, happy Thursday, Matt. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. How are you doing, Megan?
I am really good. The weather is starting to do the right thing, which is nice.
Exactly.
George, how are you doing?
Great. Sun's shining. It's beautiful. It's a good holiday weekend coming up, so it's exciting. It's good stuff.
It's very exciting. And today we're here on this beautiful Thursday to talk about cybersecurity. But before we dive into that, George, I know you wanted to say something.
Absolutely, yeah. I was going to say, I really want to thank Mandy Sun locally from IT Glue and the Kaseya team who joined us last week, and Dan Combs from Tech Runner IT out in Hicksville, Long Island, New York here. Really thank you for standing in. I was unavailable last week to do the stream, and they really just crushed it. It was really great to see them do it, and thank you, Matt, for getting that all arranged, and really appreciate it. So it's really great to be able to have folks join us and be part of the stream. And if anyone is curious or would like to join, drop us a line. We always would like to have guests.
I didn't realize that really Tech Runner was in Hicksville.
Yes, they are.
Oh, so then the Hicksville's IKEA, Tech Runner. I'm trying to think of all the places in Hicksville that matter to me. Bonchon for chicken wings.
Bonchon. Used to be a really good record store and clothing store there, but I can't remember the name of it.
And an old school Sears as well.
Old school Sears, right.
But that's not what you're here to talk about today.
No.
So now that I've got my headphones on and my audio is up and I'm not sneezing, let's get into it a little bit.
Yeah.
We're doing a cybersecurity roundup, right? Like an official series that we do where we kind of go through the landscape of cybersecurity as it is now, because it's constantly changing, and it's always good to revisit it. And the thing is, ever since the pandemic, but especially now, cybersecurity related events are on the rise, and it's not due to global events. The increase has been happening, and it will continue to happen. So again, that's why we have to keep kind of revisiting this topic. So do we want to dive in?
Yeah, sure. I think we can dive right in. I mean, there's so much happening in terms of the space. A lot of times we see a lot of things in the enterprise space, or you read about them in the media. But I think, quite honestly, the SMB is definitely much more impacted because just having lack of resources, smaller targets, but the impact can be outsized compared to the size of the company. So, and this is a dive in there. There's so many new emerging threats, so many things are happening. But one thing we want to focus on is some of the more things around the piece here, around the
it's just not the direct threat, not necessarily the attackers, but say the fallout or the change in perception of how you work with technology as a result of hearing about these threats. I think that we could have taken the time to cover actual threats that are going on right now, but you can turn on the news and get that. So let's look at it from a slightly different angle.
Kind of more a meta review of it a little bit. And one of the things that we see is the word trust. We see a lot of trust around. We hear zero trust architecture, zero trust environment. But trust is a really important concept, especially with computing, because there's a lot of erosion of trust of providers. Right? Is our data going to be safe? Is it going to be available? Is it going to be, what we put in is what we're going to get back out of these clouds and these environments? And
I think that, out of that list, the one item that is the most important is when something goes wrong, how do I know you're going to react to it in a way that's going to protect me?
Mm-hmm.
Correct. I mean, do you have the infrastructure, protocols, and people in place that you can manage and handle an event? I mean, once again, we always feel like I'm repeating the dead horse on this one, but it's not if, but when. And like we talked about the Okta event, and kind of like how people didn't know about it. There's a lot of distrust, so people get really nervous. There's when we when you start working with a vendor or start working with somebody, it's really valuable to ask the question. It's part of your due diligence to ask, oh, what is your policy? What's your plans? How are you going to handle this sort of thing?
Yeah.
So, and let's just step out of technology for a moment. Are you going to willingly hand the keys to your house to just anybody?
Right.
Because that's essentially what you're doing. We're talking and
questions
just
asked.
using Okta as an example. They're a provider of identity and access management. They're the ones holding the keys to your company in a way,
gatekeeper.
access to it. Yeah, the gatekeeper and the keymaster. That's a perfect analogy right there. But really, I mean, if you think of it in just personal terms, if you're going to give someone the keys to your house, you have to have a certain level of trust in them. You're going to want to understand why, or have a clear reasoning for why you're doing it. And I think the same thing applies to business. They're entities, they're legal business entities, not people, but you have to treat it very much the same way when you're looking at a situation like this.
Correct. And I think that, obviously there's so many examples. The one that kind of stood out because it's such an unusual one, not unusual, but like how it can impact a non-technology business was Snap-on Tools. They had this data breach that they announced on April 8th, a couple of days ago. But the breach happened in early March, and it could have actually probably been latent for months beforehand. We don't really know the full features, but
I think the thing that with that particular instance that was disappointing was that there were murmurings on Twitter about it all the way on March 4th.
Right.
So it wasn't completely concealed. It was already being talked about, and nothing else was really followed up on in an official manner until I think it was the 8th.
Yeah, I think companies need to realize to survive these cybersecurity events, it's like you have to have a plan and have to have transparency because, like we said, not if but when. And if you handle it well, you kind of stick the landing. Maybe customers will stick with you because at least you were honest, at least you were open.
Right. And I think the bigger piece of it, part of it, is that it's kind of take on what you said. People will stay with you if they feel that you handled it well.
Right.
If they have a level of comfort that you did the best. You were prepared for the event. That you kind of have that motto of being prepared.
Yeah.
And being and knowing and doing doing the work beforehand, as opposed to hoping or wishing that it's gonna be okay or not, or it's not gonna happen.
And that really goes to the second threat we want to talk about. We had, just for the record, and I love doing this because it's self-accountability. We had 3 threats, and we're going to save one of them for 2 weeks from now. See,
correct.
Now it's going to happen. That was like
exactly
a little reminder.
Yes, and it's very tied into our next episode. We're trying to chain these all together so they become really kind of more complete in terms of their kind of thought and their reach. So we're going to hold them back, but I think a lot of this is one of the bigger things is that obviously with so many different threats and so many things happening right now, we really want to have the preparation, and there's some really great content we put together, and there's great content out there. Check out our episode on the tabletop exercise. That's one of my favorite processes.
That's one of the realest episodes we've ever done.
Yes, it is. It happened. And that was I think Dan was part of that as well.
No, Jonathan Crow.
Jonathan, that's right. I'm sorry.
On that one, and I lost power at the house. But yeah, look, I guess I had preparedness listed as a threat because I think that I think it's human behavior to look at a task, accomplish it, and then put it to back of mind and forget that there are certain things that we have to maintain. Right. It's sort of like dieting. You hit that 15-pound weight loss goal and then you celebrate with a cheeseburger. That doesn't really help maintain that goal. When it comes to security or breach response processes or anything that's going to help you weather and eventually step away from some kind of security incident taking place is something that needs to be looked at, evaluated, tested, and improved on a regular basis. And, depending on the business, the way that you work with data, the custodial issues you may have with data and privacy, that may not be an annual or every 6 month thing. It could be quarterly or even monthly because again, just like you were saying, the Scout model, be prepared. There is nothing worse than something falling apart when you had your plan in place and it simply wasn't meeting your current environmental needs.
Right. And it's kind of keeping that frame of thought is that no plan is going to be, thank you, Drew. No plans are going to be perfect for every situation. And you have to have some operational flexibility, but really, and resilience. Thank you, Matt, for throwing that. That's a good one. That's a really great one. And I think that it's easy for, and that kind of goes to our next, something we're talking about later about checking boxes, because a lot of people like say, I have an IR plan, check the box, I'm done. But it really doesn't help, especially when we start working around this kind of new, we've always been talking about the expanding threat surface and threat environment, getting more complicated. And I think that is really one of the bigger pieces of it that, think about this. So many people are now hybrid, right? So much data is flowing through public networks in a way that might not have been the way it was before. Systems are now 100% hosted in the cloud. I mean, Megan and I talked to a lot of folks just in our job roles here at Valiant, and so much of people have like no infrastructure, no facility, nothing of their own that they can kind of like, not say hug the server, but it's just out in the cloud, or it's on local workstations, or it's in, or machines or endpoints, or may not even be owned by the company. So it's like, how do you manage that? So I think that one of the things that we really want, and then stack on top of that, some people having a ton of IoT devices and some of the other components that could absolutely be a massive threat. So, you start adding these things together. I think that's why it's been so much harder, is that, the attack surface is much larger. It's much simpler to attack someone, especially when they're working hybrid.
Well, when you think,
sorry, Matt, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry, it was one of those thought moments. It's almost like until recently we were in the dark ages of cybersecurity, where having a moat is all we needed.
Right.
That moat is the perimeter. That was your firewall. That was the perimeter of your network. And now your kingdom is sprawling all over the lands. And how do you protect those roadways between your castle and the other areas that you take care of? And I got to watch Shrek this weekend.
Yeah, Shrek's a great movie, by the way. And actually, to kind of continue that kind of thought of the castle versus the kind of sprawling kingdom, think about your supply chain, right? How do you get data? How do you get? Oh, that's a great point, Michael. Thank you. It's true. The BYO devices, I mean, it is add into the hybrid kind of stuff out there in the wild.
Well, we'll just throw out that at that point, it's a bring your own device situation. Just because your marketing person is using their own phone doesn't mean that 3 or 4 other people in his household are using it for other things too.
Correct.
And that's where the risks really kind of start to exponentially grow, because now you're protecting a device, you're hopefully handling the understanding and awareness of security for that person who works at the company, but that doesn't necessarily extend to everyone else that equipment's going to be exposed to.
Correct. And right. And once again, digital supply chains, right? I mean, the big one last year was the Log4j that just continues and continues and continues, like they go on. And Java is in how many millions of devices, Matt?
If you got a DVD player in your house, it's probably got Java on it.
Right.
A lot of things do, and that's what made the whole idea of the supply chain and Log4j honestly a fantastic target, because it's used so widespread in ways that most people aren't going to be aware of. And it's a significant dependency for a lot of pieces of software written in Java. And I want to say this out loud. I think I said it to myself, but I'm kind of tired of hearing the term supply chain used with regards to IT. I think dependency chain makes so much more sense.
Right.
These are elements that each layer is becoming dependent on. So if you can get one of these elements under here, everything else falls underneath. It's Jenga. It's Jenga. You're removing the brick at the bottom of the Jenga tower, and it comes crashing down. That's what it is.
And what's really interesting to me is, just talking about this digital supply chain, this sort of like libraries that being under attack. I had a call with a client the other day. They're talking with one of their clients, and they're doing some development work for them. And the client asked some really pointed questions of like, what libraries are going to be into our systems? How are you going to protect them and vet them? And I will say, very rarely at an SMB level will you hear anyone ask that question.
Yeah,
it was very unusual, and I was I wasn't taken aback, but I was fairly impressed.
Like, oh wow, you've gone well beyond the surface of normal questions.
Most people
really
were like
diving in.
Yeah, most times people are like, you have firewall and passwords.
Cool, great,
awesome,
checkboxes.
Due diligence done.
Just on a quick tangent, do you think it would be a good idea on a future episode here for me just to like run one of the dependency managers for a software project that I'd be working on, just to show how dependencies work in that chain fashion? Like, let's install this one library. Whoa, 87 others just got pushed to my machine because they're all things that one's dependent on.
Sure. I mean, I think it's a great,
like a spanning tree kind of a visual.
And it goes into some of the software development lifecycle. Security conversations that, generally speaking, small businesses don't necessarily deal with directly, but I assure you that you deal with them indirectly through your vendors, through people you might be purchasing services from. Everyone that uses software that has a library in it has a dependency somewhere, so it's really important. So, and I think one of the things that that's been kind of overplayed is identifying threats. It's kind of threat identification response. I think that so much of this has been people looking for like magic solutions to the problem, panaceas that will solve the problem. But I mean, look at so many people like, I couldn't tell you how many times I've seen things that say, here's top 5 things you should do for your cybersecurity program, MFA. But I mean, we just did a whole episode on MFA bypass.
We had MFA bypass last week. We kind of talked a little bit more about password managers by showing a couple of them how they work, because a lot of things do tend to be checklists and check boxes that you mark off and you move on from. And it's not realistic.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And unfortunately, the threat response, the detection pieces are not designed for the small, medium business. Also, not really designed in many ways for a distributed environment. This go back to what we were talking about earlier about the threat environment being so distributed or so hybridized. And that actually bring Michael's point of BYOD devices. If they're connecting to your data sets, they have access, and that's an unsecured endpoint. It's pretty significant, pretty scary stuff.
It's significant, it's scary, but it's also exciting to see what type of solutions are going to be coming out over the next, I'd say, 18 to 24 months.
Exactly. It's really cool.
We're due for a new wave of innovation in this area.
Well, and I think that goes to the next thing we want to talk about so much is the next wave or things that to keep in mind. One of the things that I would say pet peeve, but a lot of folks we have to go beyond security awareness training, and a lot of people are just like, "Yep, I got my know before. I'm set up. I'm good. I don't need to do anything besides that." And unfortunately, it's so much just check the box kind of IT.
Well, it's compartmentalized. It's like going to school and having history class and then not talking or thinking about history until you're in that class again the next day. That information is not something that was necessarily applicable to our everyday teenage lives in high school. They were just good for those 46 or 50 minutes, whatever that period was. Yeah. And I unfortunately think that we treat education, continuing education, at least within the workplace where there isn't necessarily an official curriculum or governing body, very much the way we went to school when we were kids. And that's not necessarily the most effective manner to teach someone something that's supposed to be modifying and improving their behavior for the sake of reducing risks.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a lot around, just all right, or they focus very hard on one. I mean, obviously, phishing is a massive vector, and not to downplay it.
But it can't be leg day every day.
Right.
I don't even work out. Did that make sense?
Sort of.
Okay. But no, really, it's you can't be so focused on one area because you're leaving openings all over the place. It's being aware in your surroundings. When we're walking through the city, we're listening for cars, we're watching people because there's traffic that we have to navigate. Right. If you just keep your eye on your destination and not think about anything else, you're probably not going to make it to it.
Well, it's like looking at Google Maps and having your head in the phone. Yeah, it's the direction, but what about all the actual living threats?
And I think that the traffic idea is nice because it's an awareness. It's kind of like interwoven into us. wherever we go, we're aware of the surroundings, because we have to be in order to function properly. And I think that security or awareness of the threats that are out there and ways to mitigate those threats and steps that everyone in a business can take needs to really get interwoven into that company's culture. Correct. And not just be something that is taught once every 6 months.
Right. And I think, and once again, like most initiatives or things that really move the needle, it starts with executives and the leadership of a company acknowledging that they want to improve the environment of a security for a multiple of really great reasons. I mean, like we can give you 100 reasons why you'd want to do this. Obviously, and it's a cost like anything else. It can be a cost, but it could be a way that you could differentiate your business. I think really understand. I think there's gonna be a lot of changes in the future of how we handle this, and more wise and more understanding of it. I think the deeper we get into understanding the threat and how to mitigate it for the general purpose, our team or staffs, the better the outcomes will be, because and it has to be easier. The other thing is we have to find ways to make it simpler. So it's not like so many. So that
that's the point. We want to make sure it's ingrained in each of our actions, so it no longer is something that's an effort. It becomes a habit.
Yeah.
Correct. Yeah. You never want to rely on discipline, because discipline fails really quickly over time. Whereas habit and simple, very well developed programs, not just applications, but like a program, will have the most impact over the longest period of time, I think. So I think there's a lot here. I mean, I think we got to get past the kind of traditional phishing test. I mean, it's a really valid thing, and not that we should say stop it, but I think we have to go past it to the next place.
It's like the message last week. Password managers are part of a complete breakfast. They're just a part of that. There are other components to it that you need in order to get the outcomes that you're looking for.
Yeah.
And speaking of outcomes or out of time, we're almost out of time today. So I'm going to cut things short and say that there are some items in here that we didn't cover yet that are very interesting. And you're right. When we were going over it this morning, you thought those could be separate episodes. So they're going to be. Yeah. So what we're going to do is next week, we're going to do something that's just an easy how-to for something that we all interact with on a daily basis. And that's, what is HTTPS? And do a little bit of a demo, show how it works, explain how it protects people. And then we're going to move to Q-Day, which is not anything to do with Star Trek, folks. It's quantum computing.
Well, I thought it had something to do with me. Maybe my birthday.
Oh, it could have been Megan. Quick day.
Surprise me.
Oh, I messed it up. But that's exciting, and I want to see if I can put something together a little special, because that's a very fascinating topic and one that's really just beginning to emerge. Yeah. And we're going back to the acronyms for a bit. We're going to do an entire episode where we don't speak a single word. It's just all acronyms.
That'd be a fun challenge for a bunch of IT guys to try to have the conversation. See if
IDK.
I think you guys could. I really think you could.
But so I think it's unless George, unless you have any final notes that you'd like.
No,
I think it's time to call it a day, and for me to crack it on next week. To be honest with you,
exactly. I'm really excited next week. That's a really, really topical one, and one that really directly impacts us day to day.
Yeah.
So excellent.
Thank you guys. Like and subscribe, please, and look at all our other videos. We have a very big library, and we would love for you to check it out.
Thank you.
Have a good one, folks.
Have a good one. Bye now.
Bye.